Okay, we're going to continue with our rational expressions, but now what we're going to do is extend, instead of just simplifying, and we're going to look at multiplying and dividing, which is pretty much the same thing, we just get more of it. So you can see in this picture here, we've got two fractions that are multiplying together, so what we can do is we can simplify both of them and cancel out across. So you can see the x plus 2 of one cancels with the x plus 2 of the other, and the x minus 5 goes across the multiplying sign. So a lot of the stuff we're going to do will be exactly the same. So if you remember back to simplifying, the first step was to factor everything as much as you can. Then we would cancel factors, but now we can actually cancel in between fractions. As long as one's on the top, one's on the bottom, you can cancel anywhere. And then we do all of the non-permissibles for both fractions. We're still looking at the bottom values, but for both. So let's start with just an easy fraction kind of question. So in junior high or whatever, you would have multiplied the tops, multiplied the bottoms, and then reduced the fraction. So what we're going to do now, though, instead, is we're going to actually try to take out common factors. So if I rewrite the 8 as 4 times 2 on the bottom, and if I rewrite the 15 as 5 times 3, we can actually see that we have a common factor of 4 top and bottom that can cancel, and a 5 top and bottom that'll cancel. So our final answer would be 1/6. So that actually ends up being a little bit quicker, easier way to do it than getting 20 over 120 or whatever and then trying to simplify that. So that's kind of our process for all of these. So let's look at this next one. So we have 4x squared on the top. So let's just worry about the numbers first. We have a 4 on the top and an 8 on the bottom. So we can actually cancel out those, and that would leave us with a 2. And then if we look at our letters, we have 2 x's on top and we have 2 on the bottom. So both of those would cancel. And then we have 2 y's on the top and only 1 on the bottom. So 1 would cancel. So our final answer should just be y left over on the top. And we have 3 times 2 on the bottom, which would be 6. And our non-permissibles in this case, because we have variables, we got to do all of the bottoms. So we got x and y on the bottom. So x can't be 0, y can't be 0 for both. So those are pretty basic ones. What most of the questions you're going to get, though, will involve factoring. So remember, our first step is factor if possible. So this first one, if we factor the tops, we would have 4 and 3. So we want minus 4 and plus 3. That'll give us the correct sum and products on the top. Our bottom, we have x squared minus 9, so we want plus 3 and minus 3 to give us a sum of 0. And then we do the same thing for our second fraction. We'd have minus 3 and minus 1. Those will add up to negative 4. And then on the bottom, we just want a common factor out an x. So we'd have x minus 4. So we've got all of our factoring done, so now we're ready to cancel. But we can see we lots of stuff cancels. So we have a plus 3 top and bottom. We have a minus 4 top and bottom, and a minus 3 top and bottom. And that's it. So all of that will simplify down to x minus 1 over x. And our non-permissibles go across the bottom. We have 3 and negative 3 for the first fraction, and 0 and 4 for the second fraction. And that's it. So you can see multiplying is really not much different than what we did before with simplifying. We just get two fractions that we can cancel in between. So now dividing, we basically do one extra little step. So remember, with fractions, if I gave you 1/3 divided by 2/5, when you do these in junior high, what you would do is you'd rewrite it as 1/3 times 5 over 2. So the first step then is anytime you have a dividing, we just basically want to multiply by the reciprocal. So flip that second fraction. After that, it basically becomes the same as a regular multiplying question. So factor everything, cancel all your factors, do your non-permissibles. There is one little trick with dividing with the non-permissibles, so we'll come back to that in a second once we look at some examples. So the first one, regular numbers again, so we would have 5/3 multiplied by the reciprocal, so 6 over 1. So with this one we can cancel a 3 out of each, so we'd have 5 times 2 would be 10, would be our final answer. Okay, the next one, 3x squared over y squared. We're going to times it by y over x. So we're going to cancel one of the x's and one of the y's.
Mrs. Ecker-Popiel, contact the office. Mrs. Ecker-Popiel,
so we'd have 3x over y would be our final answer, and our non-permissibles would be x can't be 0, y can't be 0. Okay, our last one on here is a factoring one. So we want to factor the top. So we'd have x plus 2, x minus 2 for the first one. common factor of the bottom, so we can just take out an x, so we'd have x minus 4. It's dividing, so we're going to multiply, and let's just do right to the factoring steps. Let's factor the bottom one first. So that'll be 5 and negative 4. And then factor the top one, we get 3 and negative 2. And that's it. So we got everything factored. We're ready to cancel. So minus 2, minus 2, minus 4, minus 4. And that's about it. So in this case, our final answer then would be x plus 2 and x plus 5 left over on top. And x and x plus 3 left over on the bottom. And our non-permissibles would be 0, minus 4. And we got negative 3 and positive 2 on the bottom there. But what we've got to be careful is we've actually flipped this fraction from the original. So because we flipped it, we actually have to do the top and the bottom. So if we look at the top, we had a, oops, that should have been a positive 4. So we actually have a negative 5 and another positive 4. So we don't need to write the 4 twice, we already had that. But you do have to worry about the tops. So if we go back to the notes here, you can see our non-permissibles for the fractions, be sure to include the top and the bottom for any fractions that were flipped. Because we're flipping it, the bottom and the top become important. So let's do a couple more examples. So here's another one with some factoring. So let's factor the top of this first one. So you'd have minus 7 and plus 1. Factor the bottom, we'd have minus 7 and plus 7. Let's flip our fractions around. So the top one will become, just take out a common factor of x out of both of these. So you'd have x and x plus 7. And on the bottom, we'd have 7 and 1. And that's it. So if you look at these, we can cancel a bunch of stuff again. Before we do the canceling, let's do our non-permissibles before we start crossing things out. So you can see on the bottom of the first one, we have plus or minus 7. And then the top of the second one, we got 0 and negative 7, which we already got. We have negative 7 on the bottom, and we'd have negative 1. So we've got all 4 of them taken care of. So when you're doing your non-permissibles, you're sort of looking at everything except for the top of the first one. So now we're good to cancel. So the minus 7s would go, the plus 7s would go, the plus 1s would go, and that's it. So our final answer would be x over x plus 7. So the last two I've got here just have multiplying and dividing. It doesn't really matter how many there are, you just do the same thing. So if we factor our first one, so I'll write it below here, so we'd have 2x and 1x. So it's a little bit tough, this one, because we got 5 and 3. So we're going to need a minus 10, so negative 5 times 2. And we need a plus 3 to give us negative 7, so those should be the correct factors. On the bottom, we can take out a 2x, so that would give us x minus 5. The second fraction is a dividing, so let's flip that. So that'd be 6 over. And we can just sort of think of square rooting both of these. So you'd have 2x minus 3 and 2x plus 3. And our last one stays the same, so we have 3 minus 2x over 1. Okay, so let's do our non-permissibles first again, just so we get those taken care of. So we'd have on the bottom of the first one, we've got a 0 and a 5. The bottom of the second one is 3 halves and negative 3 halves. The top we don't have to worry about because it was just a 6, and the bottom of the other one was a 1, so that's good. So we're done with all our non-permissibles. So now we're ready to cancel. So we got minus 5 for both, 2x plus 3 for both. Here we got 2x minus 3 and a 3x minus 2, so we can actually cancel those. They're opposite of each other as long as we make one of them negative. So let's just put a negative on with the 6, and that should take care of it. So our final answer should be negative 6 left over on the top. We have 2x times 1 on the bottom. So we have that, which we kind of messed up. We could have actually taken out a 2. We could have actually canceled the 2 with the 6 to get 3. So that would simplify to just 3 over x, minus 3 over x. Okay, let's try the last one. Same thing. Take out a 3 on the top of the first one. The bottom one will be a harder factoring, so we got 3x and 1x, and our 12 will be probably 4 and 3.
Mrs. Hamilton, can you...
So 4 and 3 would give us 12, but let's, by looking at the top, we have x plus 4, so there's a good chance that those will match, so let's try that way, and minus 3. So if we do our foiling out, we would get 3x times 4 is 12x, and minus 3x would give us 9, so that's not going to work. So maybe we got them backwards, so let's try it the other way around. So sometimes it's worth a try, but it doesn't always work. So let's switch the 3 and 4 around the other way. So we'd have 4 and 3 this way. So now when we FOIL it, we'd have 9x and minus 4x. So that'd give us 5. So we're close. We want minus 5. So we just want to change our signs here. So plus 4 and minus 3 on the other one would be good. Okay, so that's it for that one. We're dividing, so let's flip our second one. So 3x plus 4 over 12. Those are already factored. And our last one, take out a 2, so that gives us x minus 3 over x. And that's it. So we've got everything all done, so we're ready to, let's do our non-permissibles first again. So on the bottom we'd have negative 4/3, positive 3. The second one, the top of the second one would be minus 4/3, which we already got. And the bottom of the last one would be 0. So now when we cancel, 3x plus 4, 3x plus 4, oops, this top one didn't cancel. It was just x plus 4, so let's get rid of that line. So that x plus 4 stayed the same. X minus 3 would cancel. On the top we got 3 times 2 is 6, so we can cancel that with a 12, so that'll leave us with 2. And I think that's it. So on the top we have 3 times x plus 4 left over. And on the bottom we got a 2 times x left over. And that would be our final answer, and we're done.